And finally, before we get into the commands that you're going to want to teach them, the last thing to keep in mind are your basic commands on how to teach. So this is the way that you want to teach. The first thing that you need to do is to reward. Be sure to reward right on time, and so that it sticks in their mind that because I did this specific action, I got rewarded this way. You need to be sure to always capture it as soon as you can, because that's how you're going to reinforce and get to go the right way that you want. The second thing that you need to do is learn to say your command once. You don't want to be re-saying your command more than once, such as sit, 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 because that's not going to be teaching them. They're not going to learn exactly what you want. Whenever you say a command, you want it to be a command set in stone. You don't want it to be a questioning command like, well, are you going to sit? Can you sit for me? It's sit, and whenever you sit, you're sitting. That's it. And so learn to say your command once. That's part two. Number three is to be consistent. Each time that you're gonna use a command for your dog, make sure it's the same command over and over. And so whenever you're teaching your dog to sit, it might just be sit, or it could be sit down, or lay down. They're different. I say lay down. Some people say down. I say sit. Some people say sit down, and it's different. Just be sure that you stay consistent in the way that you interact with your dog, and the way that your dog learns what you're saying, and they learn what's expected of them from whenever you say that. And so be consistent, and also keep in mind whenever you're teaching your dog, it's very important alongside verbal commands are hand gestures. So whenever I tell my dog to sit, I just do this simple closed fist above her head, above her nose, and she knows to sit. Whenever I say like that, I move the hand across, she learns to stay. And so I can say those verbal commands, and she'll know what to do with or without the hand gestures. I can do the hand gestures without verbal commands, and I can be totally quiet, and she'll still know what to do. So she'll do the sitting and she'll do the staying without me having to say one single word, because she learned my commands, whether they were verbal or hand gestured, and they're always consistent. So make sure that you don't change them up. And the last thing to do is to have short, frequent training sessions. You want to make them more periodically, and they can be shorter as long as you get one or two or three or four or five or however many, however good the session is going, good actions to end it. You don't want to make one long session and then have 3 or 4 days in between before you have another long session. That's going to be defeating the purpose. You need it to be consistent. That way they can learn to get it. Like, this is how it always is, and this is how I'm always going to be. I always want to get rewarded, so I'm always going to act responsible and good. In the training, you're going to be working with multiple commands, and with each command, you can make it harder on different degrees depending on three different themes. It's the three themes that matter to make it harder are distance, duration, and distraction. And so the further away that it is, the less likely they are to listen to you, depending on um, how strong their connection is with you and how obedient they are to you, depending on how trained they are. And so distance is the first one. Duration, how long you're going to make them hold that sit position. How long you're going to make them hold that stay position while you're out doing your own thing, whether you're bouncing a ball or whatever. Bouncing a ball is the third one, distraction. Distraction is bouncing a ball around them, or just a kid being happy or excited, or just a family member in the room or something. Distraction is anything that's going to keep them if not focused on you. And so the easiest way to begin is to teach them in a room where there's nobody around, no distractions, and you're right there up close and personal teaching. And then the next step that you could take is probably like outside or something where there's cars and other dogs and across the street and stuff like that. That'll be a way to add the distraction up a little bit. You can start adding some distance in there, and then the duration, you can also start building your duration up, so you can have your dog sit for a whole 30 seconds while you walk to the end of the street and come back, and then release them. That's how strong that you can get that sit position. And the distraction, that's all different. Like I was telling you earlier, you can take your dog to PetSmart and that adds distraction up a whole lot. Or you can take your dog to a park right down the street or whatever. As long as you're mixing in those 3 Ds to make it harder, your duration, your distance, and your distraction. And those, depending on how strong you incorporate those into your training, will depend on how well behaved and how trained your dog is. And then another thing is to always end on a positive note. You don't want to stop your training while you're mad at your dog or frustrated or while your dog is confused and don't know what's going on. You want your dog to end on a happy note, meaning their dog is happy, she's just been rewarded, and that they know that they're doing good with you, their master, their trainer, and that they keep on doing what they're doing. Life's going to keep on being good for you and him. And so this is what we need to keep in mind every time we're training our dogs. These simple things. Remember to reward immediately, say your command once, keep your commands consistent, and be sure to train frequently and less periodically. And we should be in good shape on getting your dog acting in a harmonious way with you and your family.